reenactments of gladiator fights still draw crowds of spectators in Italy. In ancient Rome, such duels were even more popular than today's soccer matches between the world's top clubs. However, no sport can compare to the drama and spectacle of a gladiator fight. After all, human lives were at stake. The defeated warrior would die in the arena, while the victor could gain freedom. So many slaves dreamed of getting into a gladiator school. Sometimes, slaves would deliberately start fights among themselves to show their strength and agility.
How were gladiators fundamentally different from slaves? The fact is, the slaves, as servius, were considered living things. From the perspective of Roman law, they were residential anima, living things. Gladiators, however, were considered residential NEC anima, non-living thing. Initially, they were formally and legally recognized as dead. That is, they were not living beings who would eventually meet their end in the arena. Therefore, they were regarded as those who were already deceased, merely lingering in this earthly world by chance.
Those who are about to die salute you. This is how the gladiators entering the arena addressed the Roman Emperor Claudius. He ruled in the middle of the 1st century. During this time, gladiatorial games transformed from unorganized duels for the amusement of the crowd into strictly regulated competitions with specific rules and traditions. There were over 20 types of fighters, distinguished from each other by their equipment and weaponry.
On average, the fighters were divided into 3 classes based on, so to speak, their weight. These were the heavy class, the medium class, and the light class, and the combination of representatives from these classes created interesting situations each time. Who is stronger, for instance, heavily armed against lightly armed, and so on.
The most lightly armed gladiators were the retiarii. The total weight of their equipment was no more than 8 kilograms. These fighters did not use shields or helmets. Their arsenal included a dagger, a trident, and a net with a diameter of about 3 meters. The retiarius held it in his left hand, which was protected by a bracer and a shoulder guard. He aimed to entangle his opponent with the net. A gladiator caught in such a trap became an easy target for the trident.
The trident is the primary weapon of the retiarius. Its length was about the height of a person, and the trident allowed the wielder to keep the opponent at a distance and deliver thrusting blows, especially if there was an opportunity to strike with both hands. In some cases, the trident could also be used for defense, to parry an opponent's strike.
Often, scissors were pitted against the retiarii in combat. The name of these gladiators comes from the Latin word cindo, which means to tear apart. Their distinctive feature was the gauntlets with a blade shaped like a crescent moon. With it, the scissors would cut through the retiarii's nets and inflict shallow, but bleeding wounds on their opponents. The gauntlets were typically worn on the left hand, while a short sword, the gladius, was held in the right.
The scissor was the most heavily armed type of gladiator. Their equipment included a closed helmet and body armor, which was unusual for gladiators, as most did not have armor. The leg guards and overall weight exceeded 20 kilograms.
Alongside the scissors, the murmillo was also considered a heavyweight gladiator. They wore short armor, a massive helmet with a grid visor, and metal gauntlets. In one hand, the murmillo held a gladius, and in the other, a scudo, a full-length rectangular shield of the Roman legionaries.
Murmillo.
A variety of murmillones were the secutors. The equipment of these gladiators was tailored for combat with the retiarii. The streamlined helmet made it difficult to catch the head with a net, and the solid visor with 2 small eye holes reliably protected the face from the trident. The heavily armed secutor always aimed to draw the opponent into close combat. The retiarius, on the other hand, tried to maintain a medium distance to effectively use the net and trident.
The ancient Roman historian Gaius Suetonius mentions an episode that occurred in the 1st century AD under Emperor Caligula, when a match took place between 5 secutors and 5 retiarii wearing tunics. As a result of this fight, initially, the 5 retiarii gave in and were already preparing for death. But one of them unexpectedly grabbed a trident, the main weapon of a retiarius, and according to the historian, killed all his opponents.
The chances of victory for a warrior going to his death depended primarily on his strength, agility, and reflexes. However, the fighter's equipment and weaponry, as well as the type of opponent he faced, also played a significant role. Which gladiators were the most effective in the Colosseum arena?
It's difficult for us to judge. The fact is, we don't have detailed statistics on gladiator fights. We can only make assumptions. There is a theory that the Murmillos faced difficulties, and the issue was that they're not very well thought out, overly allegorical equipment, particularly the difficulties with using the helmet. It was very heavy, obstructed vision, and the fin-shaped crest was very convenient for the net of the retiarius to catch.
It is the retiarii, according to some experts, who were the most effective warrior slaves. Their fights with the Murmillos and secutors were of the greatest interest to the spectators. However, in these duels, the audience usually did not support the retiarii. Many believed that using a trident and net against a heavily armed warrior was cowardly and unfair.
If the outcome of the fight was not in the retiarius' favor, his chances of survival were slim. As everyone knows, the defeated opponent would ask the crowd for mercy, for a sign, a clemency, or the end of his earthly life, and unfortunately, in the case of the retiarii, the crowd most often turned their thumbs down.
In such situations, the audience most often spared the lives of the secutors. These gladiators were among the audience's favorites. They were valued for their spectacular fighting style, as well as for fighting with the noble weapons of the Roman legionaries.
We know quite a few examples of successful secutors, particularly the gladiator Flamma, who fought 34 gladiatorial matches, winning the majority, specifically 21 matches and drawing 9. There were also defeats in his career, but they did not result in his death for a time. Moreover, he became a retiarius 4 times, meaning he received a wooden sword, and thus his freedom, yet he continued his gladiatorial career until he was eventually killed in one of the matches.
Even the most successful gladiators rarely crossed the threshold of 30 fights. 80% of warrior slaves died within the first 10 matches. That is, within 2 years from the start of their career. The coveted wooden sword, the rudis, granting freedom, was received from the emperor only by the best of the best.
But paradoxically, it was often the case that even the few who survived dozens of their unfortunate comrades and managed to receive this symbolic wooden sword upon gaining freedom simply did not know what to do with it. They didn't know how to do anything. After months spent in the gladiator school, in the circus, in the arenas, they became unaccustomed to a normal, constructive life.
Many free gladiators continued to participate in deadly combats. Such fighters were called retiarii. In some cases, warriors hardened in the arena became part of the show business built on bloody sports. Most often, they were hired as trainers,